I'm so excited to be here with you, and it's really profound that we're talking about innovation and entrepreneurship, and that is an act of leadership. And so what I wanted to really share with you today is that leadership is the X factor for you to catalyze your success of whatever you're ideating or whatever you have emerging right now into the marketplace. This involves conscious leadership, and that takes inspiration from the conscious capitalism movement. How many of you are familiar with conscious capitalism? Okay. Now, while you might not be familiar or be familiar with conscious capitalism, you will know the companies that are involved in conscious capitalism, that founded or participate. And these are companies, and think about the culture as I mentioned these companies. These are companies like Whole Foods, Starbucks, Best Buy, Patagonia, Zappos. And they lead with 4 principles. And the first principle is higher purpose drives. Higher purpose drives. So as you're thinking about ideating your process, what is your higher purpose that you invested in around that? Next is to make sure that all stakeholders in the ecosystem are accounted for. So this is not only shareholders, but this is vendors, your colleagues, certainly your customers, clients, and the environment. And then the third principle is conscious leadership that drives conscious culture and a thriving environment. And there's great science talking about the track in terms of why this is good for business. Raj Sisodia wrote a book called Firms of Endearment, tracking 28 companies, 18 of which were publicly traded, for 15 years, and showed that companies that run off conscious capitalism principles outperformed the S&P over that time by 15 to 1. So conscious leadership, conscious business is good for business. It's about doing good, and it's about good for business. If you want to learn more, there's a conscious capitalism chapter here in San Diego as well. You're welcome to explore more there. So here is the track of what it looks like. You have conscious leadership that drives an engaged, thriving culture that results in highly valued and inspirational customer experiences that results in a profitable enterprise. So I want to share with you a little bit more about the neuroscience track, about why this is, and then provide you some footholds, some skills, tools, and insights that you can engage in to elevate your capacity for leadership, to really catalyze what you're doing right now in terms of your entrepreneurial endeavors. So first of all, I want to invite you to think about the most inspiring leader that you've ever encountered. And think about what inspires you about that leader. Think about what you're doing right now in terms of how you're leading the marketplace. Who inspires you to lead from your higher self and be as effective as you possibly can be? And then think about what are those qualities that so inspire you. So what are some of those qualities that inspire you? What's an example of some of those qualities? Courage. So courage is huge in the entrepreneurial space. What else? Integrity is huge. Compassion. So coming from a heartfelt place. Believing in yourself. Leadership. And this is all about leadership. What else? Creativity. Knowledge. So knowledge and competence. Assertiveness. Again, coming back to courage. Persistence, exactly. Mission. Being connected again to vision, purpose, and mission. Now to contrast that, think of the qualities then of low performance leaders, leaders that have tortured or made you bristle. What are those qualities? Micromanagement. Not a team player, right? Not playing well with others, not knowing how to collaborate. What else? Doesn't listen, so you really don't know what's meaningful to other people. You don't empathize enough to know what would be of service to others. Imbalanced sense of self. Yeah. So this comes down to an imbalanced sense of self. What do you mean by that? Imbalance.
Meaning that the rate that you see your employees below you.
Exactly.
So it's about leveling that playing field up to your own.
Huge. And this is about leading from that place of ego. So leading, here, low performance leaders oftentimes are in service of themselves, in contrast to high-performance leaders that are in service of something larger than themselves. So there's a organization called the Leadership Circle. And many years I've been talking about this high performance and low performance leadership being embodied by the creative or reactive mindset. And these are high performance, low performance states. And these are the domains and subdomains. They've done 65,360 reviews, very well validated instruments. And these are the domains of high performance leadership. High performance leaders are achievement oriented. They have purpose and vision, they're strategically focused, they're decisive, and they get results. They also relate well to others. They care, they foster team play, they collaborate well, and they mentor well. They have courageous authenticity, as you mentioned, courageous authenticity. And then they have great systems awareness. Essentially, they can step back, and they're fundamentally concerned for the community, and they know how to sustain productivity without burning others out or themselves out. And they're fundamentally self-aware. They're personal learners, they have composure, they have balance, and they're selfless leaders. I'm simply putting a framework around what you already know. These are the domains, and hopefully this is what we all aspire to in terms of our leadership. And here are the domains of low-performance leadership. So low-performance leaders, again, threatened by ego, can be overly complying. These leaders are wishy-washy, they're indecisive, they don't take a stand. So they're pleasing, conforming, or passive. Or they can be overly protective, arrogant, cynical, critical, and distant. Or they can be overly controlling, autocratic, driven to prove self-worth, and perfectionistic, hence all the micromanagement. Now, there is data, so that resonates, right? Now, there's data to show that this is not soft science. When you look at their 360 reviews, and you look at leaders, and you calculate the reactive mindset scores, that is almost a straight line correlation with leadership effectiveness. And leadership effectiveness correlates with sales and revenue growth, market share, profitability, return on assets, quality of products and services, new product development, and overall performance, which is exactly what we're talking about over here at Ignite, what it means to be a high-performance entrepreneur. Conversely, you look at the data on low-performance reactive mindset leaders, it's the inverse. So the question then becomes, how do you begin not only to develop your products, but how do we begin to develop ourselves in anticipation of the work that we want to do? They go hand in hand. You can't separate those two. So let me kind of give you some footholds and some insight in terms of what goes into the cultivation of that growth. So first of all, here are the reactive and creative mindset. Who over here can relate to both sets of high performance qualities and low performance qualities even on the same day, right? We oscillate between these high and low performance states. Why? Because these qualities map to very specific regions of our brain that we all have. And so when you look at this next part of growth and understanding is an understanding of how your brain works, because if you know how your brain works, you then can begin to understand how you can better work your brain to lead from your highest self. And so there are a number of ways of doing this. I'm going to be very brief in the time we have. So here you have the brain. One of the easiest ways of understanding this construct of the brain is a construct called the triune brain, which is a three-part evolutionary model of the brain, where the brain develops from the bottom up and the back forward. And so the base of the brain over here is the brainstem, very survival-oriented. And this has been termed, you may have heard, the reptilian brain, for example. And this is all about fight, flight. This is all about safety and survival. Now, unlike reptiles that lay the eggs and skedaddle, we as mammals do something different. So the next part of evolution gives rise to this constellation of structures over here, known as the paleomammalian brain or the limbic system. And this part of the brain, represented by the palm of my hand, is all about our primal drives, our pursuit of food, water, sex, pair bonding. It's overly simplistic, considered the seat of emotions and affiliation. And then there's a structure over here that goes across the end of my thumb, a structure called the amygdala that lays down emotional memory. It ties into our reward circuitry, and what we're doing with each other all day long, we're scanning each other. And by the way, your potential customers are scanning you as well. Am I safe or not safe? Am I safe or not safe? Is this person, event, or product a reward or a threat to my time? And if they match for unsafe, they go straight into fight and flight behaviors, even before you know you do. Now, if we only had these two parts of the brain, we'd be highly impulsive individuals moving towards pleasure and away from danger. So you've got this third part of the brain that maps over the top, and this is called the neocortex, the new brain, which is the seat of conscious awareness, your ability to weigh the present, imagine a better future, and figure out how you're going to get there. But you've got this structure right behind your forehead called the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex, if you're going to designate the CEO of your brain, it would be this part of your brain. And I'll share with you some of its qualities, and you'll see that these map into the high performance characteristics, as opposed to the fight and flight safety-oriented dimensions that will map into the low performance characteristics. So first of all, this maps over the amygdala, so the first thing that you get from the prefrontal cortex is emotional control. Then you have information coming up from your gut intelligence, your heart intelligence, going up, radiating forward. It conveys social, emotional intelligence, empathy, compassion, your ability to relate well to others. It's also the seat of our executive functions, judgment, planning, abstraction, decision-making. So your ability to achieve results. It's also involved in willpower, your ability to follow through on your goals and engage with persistence. And then it's got this quality of metacognition where you can step back and look at the mental maps of your mind and say, "Hoy, there goes a damn crazy thought. Perhaps I won't act on that one." So it conveys a sense of wisdom. Now, if you look at this, where the base of the brain is focused on safety, the middle is about affiliation and belonging, and the highest part of our brain is about giving us the capacity for significance, the brain essentially maps against that. And what is that? That's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, simplified into 3 levels. Safety, belonging, significant. Right on. Right on. So your brain maps against Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And what we learn from this is when we feel overwhelmed or threatened with stress, uncertainty, and self-doubt, we drive ourselves down into our safety circuits, fighting and taking flight, fighting to prove self-worth, fighting for control, and taking flight from anything that leads us experiencing self-doubt or being out of control. And we find ourselves in the states of reactivity. On the other hand, it's your capacity to tap into what inspires you the most with passion and purpose, as well as your ability to harness other types of stress responses, like the tend and befriend response or the challenge response, that can serve as inspirational fuel to elevate you into leading from your higher self, being able to tap your full capacity for creativity and innovation. And we run this oscillation between these states of reactivity and creativity all day long. We run that all day long. But you're not an island. We're not an island because we're wired to connect. We're wired to connect, which means actually that we have influence on others because we're wired to connect. Leadership is an act of influence. It's not a role or a position. It's an act of influence. It's the capacity to influence the character and behavior of others for good. So the way you show up as a leader influences your culture. And it's mediated, this influence and how we're wired to connect is mediated through our automatic nervous system, which has a parasympathetic nervous system that taps the brakes, where we can stay and play, feed and breed, pause and plan. But the moment we get triggered, something's dangerous, step on the gas, and we go into fight and flight. The sympathetics go straight into fight and flight behavior in a heartbeat. Now, I want you to notice over here the innovation around the face and the voice box. You cannot hide your stress from others. People will pick it up in a second. Our stress shows up on our face because of the way of this innovation. And when we get stressed, we lose the prosody of our voice. So which Mona Lisa do you find more attractive? So, hell not safe. This, you thin slice and your parasympathetic dominant, softening around the eyes, the Mona Lisa smile, you say safe. She's safe to approach. Hence, this Mona Lisa is attractive, meaning this person is approachable, safe to approach. So how you show up as a leader in your environment has a dramatic effect on how others respond in your environment. And when you begin to look at this, there are at least 5 systems in terms of how we wire to connect. Mirror neurons, circuits of emotional empathy, cognitive empathy, that conspire to this cycle of reactivity. So when we come to work, or even at home, and we're reactive in fight and flight, what happens? You trigger fight and flight in somebody else. Their behavior triggers you again, and you're going around in a cycle of reactivity. So what is a cycle of creativity? And I didn't know this. I looked for this in the science. I couldn't find this in science. I learned this from my mom. My mom had never been sick a day in her life, and she was here in San Diego, and my mom was beautiful. And I came down to San Diego about 10 years ago, and she was losing weight, and she had vague abdominal pain, and her doctors didn't think anything of it. And I'm a physician by training, and I took over my mom's workup, and I'll never forget the radiologist called me. He said, "I'm so sorry to have to tell you, your mom has pancreatic cancer, and it's spread to her liver." And the next phone call I had to make was the most difficult of my life, because I had to call and give my mom a diagnosis. And I called, I said, "Mom, I'm so sorry I have to tell you. You have pancreatic cancer and it's spread to your liver." She said, "Oh my God, that's a silent killer, isn't it?" She knew she had months left of her life. And I said, "I'm going to get on a plane." And I flew down to San Diego over here, and I walked in the door and I held my mom in arms. I said, "Mom, I promise you this is going to be the richest year of your life." And it was. Now, as beautiful as my mom was, she was racked with self-doubt. To the point, if we didn't comment how good her cooking was, or how good she looked, she would rail and she would get very angry. She consumed attention. But the moment she was diagnosed with a cancer, something else happened. She had no need for self-doubt, and she started radiating love. And we just wanted to be close to her. And this is Mom 2 weeks before she died, and while there's a beauty over here, there's another kind of beauty in her capacity to radiate love in this picture. She was just pure love by the end. And when the rabbi came by 3 days before she died, he leant in at the bedside, and he had cancer himself, so he had a special kinship with Mom. And he leant in and he said, "Yvonne, after all these years, what have you learned is the meaning of your life?" And we never thought that Mom was going to open her eyes. And I thought if she did, she was going to say, "To get love," and because she craved love all her lifetime. And miraculously, she opens her eyes. And she says, "To give love. To give love. To give love." Those were her dying words. And I said to a wise friend a while later, I said, "My mom moved in her life in this amazing way from a place of to get love to give love." And my wise friend said, "But what if your mom had learned how to receive love in her lifetime?" And then it came to me that the cycle of creativity is a cycle of learning how to receive and give love with another, to receive others with empathy and understanding, and to give with authenticity and care. And that is the essence of the entrepreneurial journey. It's really understanding your clients with empathy and understanding, and giving with authenticity and care in ways that make a meaningful difference to their lives. I met Danny Mayer actually at Conscious Capitalism. He's the chairman of the Shake Shack. And I went to him, and in New York, I went to his offices, and he said something very profound. He said there's a very big difference in business between service and hospitality. He said service is a monologue. Hospitality is a dialogue. And so I encourage you to think on the entrepreneurial journey, what kind of dialogue are you having with your customers? How well do you empathize and understand their needs, and how well do you give, and how well do you stay in that cycle of communication with them? The implications of this is we don't only experience reactivity and creativity within ourselves because we're wired to connect. We're involved in these cycles of reactivity and creativity. So ultimately, if you're over here in the cycle, you are driving people down into safety, foregoing love and belonging and significance, and over time, when you do that, we become burnt out. On the other hand, if we can reverse the cycle in the cycle of receiving and giving, we drive up into a place of belonging and significance, and what lands up happening is, with high performance and low performance leadership states, the consequence of this is you actually either cultivate engaged cultures or disengaged cultures. And we know from Gallup, this results in either cost or benefit. That's the neuroscience track in understanding why we as a leader, when we show up leading from our higher selves, not only do we do good, but why this is crucial for business. So just in the remaining time that we have, I just want to give you just some brief nuggets in terms of, with this understanding, how do you begin to leverage this insight to lead from your highest selves. And what this involves in terms of shifting is the first is your capacity to recognize the frame that you're in. For you to recognize your frame and for you to recognize the frame of the culture that you're in. And with influence, having the capacity to shift those frames. So what does a safety frame feel, look like, sound like? So over here, we're threatened with stress and self-doubt. So this frame is all about power and control. It's about superiority, inferiority. It's about the language over here is what if and all the catastrophes that could happen, or if only and the regrets of our past, or what's wrong with me and what's wrong with other people. And we can spin in safety all day long with complaining and whining and resistance. When you get to belonging, something shifts. And when you're in safety, you can't see the frames above. But when you get elevation, you can see the frames below. So what does belonging feel like? Belonging feels like, oh man, I am spinning. This is hard. This is hard. And instead of being in it, you're above it, seeing the flailing going on. And then you're inclining towards yourself and others like you would incline towards a good friend. And the language there is, how can I better take care of myself and others? That's why compassion and empathy is so crucial in business. And then you get to the significance frame, which is the most powerful frame at all, because at that frame, you can actually see all the frames below. And in that frame, the language changes. Instead of what's wrong with me and what's wrong with others, you begin to dialogue and say, what's our highest purpose and service? How can we best contribute? And at this place, you have full accountability, full responsibility. You're in a creative frame rather than in the victim frame. In reactive, you've shifted. So how do we shift in terms of optimizing the frames? One of the cores of leading well from within and high-performance conscious leadership, I believe, is mindfulness. How many of you are familiar with mindfulness? Beautiful. And just from whether it be a business or just life presence, life transformation, this is the way I define it. Mindfulness is the capacity to pay attention with a sense of openness, kindness, and curiosity for what's ever arising in the present moment. And oftentimes, whenever we get stressed, we want to shut the door on stress. But by doing that, we shut the door on growth as well. So openness enables you to just allow what is, meet with what is, releasing your resistance, which gives you a deeper sense of internal safety. The kindness activates your love and belonging needs, pulling you up that hierarchy, giving you the courage to move forward. Kindness is not only, releases oxytocin, which is not only the cuddle chemical, but it's the chemical of courage as well. And then curiosity, insatiable curiosity activates your capacity for significance. The greatest entrepreneurs are insatiably curious, and that elevates you up into your capacity to lead from your highest self. So that's a foundation. I also offer 4 steps that can help you to proactively shift between states of reactivity and states of creativity that I'd speak about in leading well from within. I'll just go through this very, very briefly. So the first thing is, if you're in states of reactivity, you cannot effectively navigate your reactivity unless you can learn how to recognize and manage it first. It's called the 4-in-4 framework because there are 4 steps and then there are 4 components to each step. So the first step is learning how to recognize and manage your reactivity. Learning how to recognize your reactive sensations, thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And if you notice that this is doing more harm than good, to actually learn how to take the edge off that reactivity. Literally by pausing, taking a few breaths, you can even name it, just know what's there, and then considering your best response. Next is you can take the edge off your reactivity, but you may not be completely done, because sometimes there are things that have their hooks in us. And oftentimes things that have their hooks in us are underlying beliefs that are driving those reactive responses to begin with. So in this step, you get to reframe your experience with underlying triggers of stress and self-doubt. You begin to reframe your relationship, and the most powerful relationship you can reframe, first of all, is your relationship with stress. The old definition of stress is, can I cope? Can I cope? That means every time you get stressed, how empowered do you feel? Not very empowered. I love the definition. There's a couple of researchers at Stanford that talks about their definition of stress. It's not can I cope. This is Kelly McGonigal and Alia Crum. Just think about this, if this was your definition. Stress happens when things you care about are at stake. That means that stress is not a weakness. It means you get stressed because you give a damn about something. And it's you feeling that energy mobilizing your body, and rather than saying, how can I get rid of the stress, you begin to say, recognize the stress, and then you get to say, what is it that I really care about, and how can I leverage that energy in alignment with the outcomes that really matter. Both of those, your ability to recognize your reactivity and really reframe your underlying relationship with stress and self-doubt, gives you a deep sense of internal safety and confidence as an entrepreneur, or any other way that you show up in your life. That liberates your energy to move further up Maslow's hierarchy of need into states of belonging and significance, which brings us to step 3, which is about cultivating creativity by focusing on what really matters in your life. And what I offer over here in this step is looking at what is the recipe for the flourishing life, and I offer a 4-component process called vision, strategy, implementation, and results as a way of driving your entrepreneurial journey. So you're coming up with a clear vision where you want to go, and then putting in, I don't believe in smart goals, but I do believe in smart results. And I then, rather than going strategy implementation, I go next to my results, looking at what are my specific measurable. The A is aligned to my vision, realistic and time frame results that will represent stepping stones towards the vision. And then I put my strategic implementation plan in place, and then we'll iterate that cycle. If I don't hit the gates of my results, I say, is my vision how I wanted to see it? Were my strategies comprehensive? Was my implementation thorough, and were people accountable? Or were these results realistic to begin with? And you iterate that cycle. Step 4 is the most important step of all. And that step is you can actually know how to navigate stress and focus on what matters with clarity. But it's still the internal voice in our brain that chatters away at us all day long. What if, and all the bad things that could happen? If only the regrets of our past. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with other people? That drives a lot of our behavior. So if we can learn how to reseed, notice that chitty voice, but reseed a more inspired and productive dialogue, we can catalyze our growth in service of what matters. So instead of what's wrong with me, difficult moment, what's it I'm here to learn? How can I better connect with others? How can I better connect with myself? How can I better connect with my deepest source of inspiration? What's my highest purpose and service? How can we best express ourselves? That drives a different kind of internal dialogue, and that internal dialogue that then leaks out of us becomes part of the fabric of external dialogue in a culture that is the fabric of culture and change, with everybody having the capacity to elevate and lead from their highest selves. So my greatest wish for you today and tomorrow in this conference on your journey is that you learn how to lead from your highest selves, knowing how to proactively shift between states of reactivity and states of creativity to elevate your capacity to cultivate a greater sense of belonging with all those you work with and all those you serve, to deliver great services, products that elevate and inspire and make a huge difference in the lives of others. It's been an absolute joy and privilege of being able to share with you. I also want to thank Brianna. Thank you so much for all the setting this up. And Brianna very, very generously and colleagues have purchased some books on leading well from within as gifts. We only have 50 copies, but if you're interested, we'll be doing a book signing after the session over here and be happy to chat with you further about that. Thank you so much for your time and attention. It's a real privilege to talk with you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.